Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. TGIFF. So, I just got home, drove about 120 miles today. I was on the road. And one of the topics that came up when I was speaking with some young women about mental health and recovery was incarceration, jail time. Now, I put out a video 2 months ago, I guess, about some of my experience with being in jail and the caveats that come with being gay and being in jail. So I didn't want to talk about that really again, but what I did want to do was talk about a 3 month stint that I did, um, and maybe highlight for you some folks who maybe aren't familiar with corrections, what goes on in a prison, anything like that. So it's not just for people who are familiar with it. And if you're from outside the United States, this will give you a little bit of insight as to how things can roll. Uh, Same preface I gave to the other one. I was in jail because I had two DUIs within 6 months in 2008. So now almost 11 years ago. Drinking and driving is irresponsible, reckless. I could have killed somebody. I could have died myself. Somebody innocent could have been hurt or killed. So, while I'm telling you about my experience during this story time, please bear in mind that even if any of the things that happened during my experience in jail were off color or a little bit funny, the reason that I was there is absolutely not funny. Okay? So I just wanted to clear the air with that. So, I had been in jail once before, in another state, in New York. So I had had a little bit of experience, I thought, with being incarcerated. Now, I did not think I was going to jail when I went. Pre-sentence, so for 3 months prior to my sentencing, I had on one of those Lindsay Lohan alcohol bracelets. In the town I grew up in, everybody had them. You should see it in the summer. It's like they're an accessory. And I thought, well, I wore that, and I went to some outpatient treatment. I went to 90 AA meetings in 90 days, and the judge still put me in jail. I probably got off easy, to be honest. And my sentence was 5 years, and the first 90 days had to be done in the county jail. So take that into account, too. I was not doing state prison time. I was not doing years or even 1 year. It was a short period. It was pretty much the whole summer, because I went to jail July 1st, and July, August, September. I got out at the beginning of October. Out of the courtroom, I was taken into the basement where they took my tie. I had a very nice tie, and I never got it back. Still bitter about that. I've mentioned that more than twice. And then we were transported over to the jail into the classification area. So they took my picture and got my height. According to them, I'm 5'11", whatever. I think I'm 6 feet tall. They put me into a room, and I had to wear a jumpsuit, an orange one, and I have every single jumpsuit of every single size was grabbing me between my area and yanking very high. I just couldn't get one that I could get over my shoulders. I must have a long torso, I guess. So that was uncomfortable. I had to stay in one of those for a couple days because in the area I was classification. So you come in, they kind of decide where you should go within the jail. And each section of the jail, prisoners wear different colors of clothing, depending on what the classification was. So they also wanted to test everyone for tuberculosis, for TB. So you all get that skin pop test, and you have to stay in the cell you're in during classification for, it's about 2 days till they can see if you're negative or not for that. So basically the first 2 days was just sitting in my cell, sleeping, mortified of my circumstances, of course. And they switched out cellmates I had a few times, which, if I did have contagious TB and they kept switching people out, wouldn't that be a risk? I mean, that's not for me to say. So, I stayed there for 2 days, and then I was put out into the general population. I was going to be in the dorms. The dorms are minimum security. There are 6 different cells, 3 on the top tier, 3 on the bottom tier, and there are 16 people per cell, 8 bunk beds in each cell. And that's where I was going to be going. I was going to D block, DB, and the cell I was in was number 5. So they walk us up, and you can tell we're new, because we don't have the uniforms yet. They march us up in our orange jumpsuits, and all the prisoners can see us coming by, and they hoot and holler and make noises. And you get your bin and your mat to put on your rack on your bunk, and some sheets, and they should give you clothes. Sometimes they would come later, like the color you're gonna wear. They were brown on the the block that I was on. Try to make it sound like a hospital. It was not a hospital, believe me. One of the girls I was talking to today was like, it sounds like it's better than the psych ward. I'm like, it's not better than the psych ward. The psych ward has Ativan. There's no Ativan in jail. So I got to my cell, and obviously being gay in jail had its complications. I'll put a card up here for the other video I did. Suffice it to say, I got my share of bullying, if you want to call it bullying. As an adult in a prison, it's not really bullying. It's more like initiation, to see what you could take. I was able to kind of hold my own with it. I didn't make a joke out of myself, but I didn't take myself too seriously, and I didn't really react. And that seemed to stall it. Because a lot of the guys wanted to talk about my sexuality a lot, like all day. I don't think I ever heard the word faggot but once. I'll give credit to that. There was that kind of level of respect. But it did have its own kind of complications. So once I got settled in, and you kind of meet the people, we would rotate bunks, depending on who's oldest in the hut, in the cell, and who's the newest. So you would start in the middle on the top bunk, because there's no wall next to you. It feels the least secure. Then, if a corner opened up, you could move into a corner bunk on the top, and then your next move would be a bottom bunk in the middle, again, and then a bottom bunk on the bottom. And front of the cell, right by the door, would be not preferable. In the back would be the best, because then if you're doing anything conspicuous, you'd be able to hide it. Like if you were, example, smoking. You're not supposed to smoke in the jail. If you were making alcohol, if you were, I don't know, selling stuff, anything like that, you'd want that space in the back. So I was up on the middle rack, and I made my way around and finally got to a bottom rack. So it took a little time, probably 5 weeks until that happened. The food is food. I mean, chow comes... Chow! They call it over the loudspeaker. It's early. Usually in my cell, we'd all get up, get our food, eat in the cell. We didn't eat at the tables downstairs. They were all kind of claimed by people who... My first day, I did just grab my tray and go sit down, and then I was told politely by about 5 or 6 bloods that was their table and they needed the seat. So I looked around and I found that all the guys in my cell were just taking their trays back to the bunk and eating there. So I did that. Then one person each day would take the trays down. This was just kind of a community agreement. And then we'd go back to bed till like lunch. And then they'd call chow, we'd go get food, come back, and that's when the coffee would come out. That's when visitors would come into the cell. We were only locked in the morning for like an hour or two. In the afternoon, in the evening, and then pretty much overnight. Unless you had to go to the bathroom, because in the 16-man cell, there's no bathroom. You have to go down to the hall at the end. They call them the dorms for that reason. There's 2 showers on the top tier, 2 showers on the bottom, and 6 toilets for 90-plus men. So it was comfy. Believe me, it was comfy. Time really runs together when all your days are kind of the same. It just became a succession of meals and naps and cigarettes. You try to find something to do, your bid, to kind of fill up the time. I didn't have one of my own. I didn't play spades. Everybody played spades in jail. Everybody. Someone tried to teach me. I couldn't keep up. They were very patient. A lot of and it was split up by race. I mean, let's be fair. I was in jail, and it's a whole separate discussion probably about race, incarceration, the reasons people were incarcerated, how long they were incarcerated. But suffice it to say, the proportion of people that were not white in the jail was not the same as the people that were not white who were getting treatment. It seems like if you were an addict and you were one color, you were being offered treatment court and rehab, and if you were another, you were just sitting in jail. That's not the case everywhere. I'm not saying anything about that other than that it was happening. I'm not suggesting why. But at any rate, there was a lot of folks who had gang affiliation, either Latin Kings or Bloods, and they were actually pretty cool. I was terrified of them, till one of them came up and gave me a fist bump, and I was like, okay, that's good. And there was like one guy. The cells were kind of split up by race, and people kind of hung out by race. It wasn't as severe as you see in movies, because I'm in like a little county jail in a small county in Pennsylvania. But still, people have to hold their spot. So usually the black guys would play spades with each other, and the white guys would, and the Latin guys would play dominoes. And I would just do. I was goober. I mean, I would do. I would get crossword puzzles mailed to me that I would do. The block worker, they used to call him OG, and the block worker would be outside when we were locked in, and he would go out and clean the tables, mop the floor. He was tight with the CO. He had more freedom than we did, and he was reimbursed $1 a day for his work or something like that. And he was a diabetic, and I always ordered hard candy when I would order my commissary, and I would bribe him with Fireballs and Jolly Ranchers to give me the paper, because there was only 2 that would fly around the whole block and they'd be shredded, because I wanted the crossword puzzle. And sometimes somebody would try to start doing it, and I would always finish it, of course, in ink, because when you have nothing to hold on to, you gotta be something. So I became the smart guy. I was helping a couple guys study for their GED, because it was like a condition of their parole, so that was something I did to kill time also. Make it very clear, I'm a college graduate. If I had to take a GED test right now, cold, I would fail bad. I mean, there's a lot of information you're expected to be able to spit back at once in a GED test. So, if you're an older student going back, or you've been out of school for a while, it's no joke if people say go back and get your GED. It's not like you can just go do it some afternoon. You really do have to prepare. The other thing I did for a little bit of extra was there was guys who would get letters from their girlfriends, and I would write the letter back. They would rewrite it in their own handwriting, but they were looking for things to say, poems, stuff like that. And of course they assumed I could write poetry. I can't write poetry, but I knew enough song lyrics that I could kind of stitch together and make them sound okay. I may have reworded a few words to that Beyonce song, Halo, and then pretended that I came up with it, because the guy paid me 2 ramen soup. So that was another little thing I did. And I worked out a lot. There was a guy in my cell, straight guy, looked like Superman. I was in love with him because there was nothing else to do. And we would lift all the time. And I can't lift for crap, and I probably almost broke my wrist, and I could barely walk. I couldn't get into my cell because my arms wouldn't move, or my rack. I was crawling on my elbows. But it meant I could spend time with him. So I totally, whatever. You want me to lift up a car? Sure, I can do it. So that was another way that we killed almost all the time during the day, because we'd work out from right after lunch up until dinner, and then after dinner we would usually just bullshit, whatever, and then you get meds and lights out, and that was pretty much the whole day. So I had my little hustles, the things that kept me busy. My parents would come for visits. They'd come once a week, and they would put some money on my commissary when they came. And I would usually split the difference. I'd buy stuff for the hot guy because he sold tobacco illegally. And there was another guy I'd go in with. So we would get a pouch between the 2 of us. A pouch of tobacco would be $50, I think. And you're talking like they would count it in fingers, 2 fingers. So a Ziploc bag, and it's filled that deep with tobacco. And that's $50. So he'd give it to us for $40. We'd each give him $20 worth of food. So my parents would give me $40. I'd get $20 worth of food for myself, and then $20 worth of food to pay for that. And the food is like ramen noodles, instant coffee, hard candy I used to get, candy bars, honey buns, big Texas cinnamon rolls, stuff like that. And people are very creative at cooking when they're in jail too. I pretty much just had my hard candy because they lasted a long time. I'd bribe the block worker with them. And sometimes guys would come over on my rack and just sit and talk. They felt like they could talk to me. I said in another video, they would always say, I feel so comfortable talking to you. It's like talking to a girl. That's not really an insult. What they mean is that they're comfortable talking to me like they aren't talking to other guys. They're probably not threatened or intimidated by me or anything, so they feel okay. That's fine with me. I'd give them a Jolly Rancher and send them on their way. So, So jail was interesting. The only times things were dicey, I did get in trouble once, um, and I got a $2 fine for having a ripped T-shirt. Um, Frisking, they would rip out apart our cells if they thought they found contraband because we had smoke coming out of our cell because we smoked. That happened, and the COs didn't want to frisk me. You know why, right? So they would only frisk me from my elbows down and my knees down. So they would every guy in the hut would give me all their contraband. So when the COs would come to frisk us, on my waistband I would have razors and tobacco and a cigarette lighter, like all sorts of stuff, because the COs thought they were going to catch a case of the queers if they touched me. So they didn't do their job, and all the contraband stayed. So that was my contribution to the hut. So so that's about the long and the short of it. I got out 3 months later and I went on to house arrest. And I still see some of the guys periodically. Some of them who were in my hut they're in state prison. A couple of them very recently overdosed and died. Most of them were addicts. And we were kids. We were in our 20s. We didn't know any better. We were just playing tough, but it felt more like camp for bad kids. So I wouldn't do it again. I certainly wouldn't do the thing that got me there again. But it did leave me with some interesting stories and an interesting perspective about men and people who I think are so different from me that really, really aren't. So that's my story time about incarceration. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Hit the bell to get the alerts. Give us a thumbs up. Leave some comments, suggestions, slander, whatever you feel like. And I will catch up with y'all soon. Happy Friday. Bye.